All right, we're going to bring this meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, December 4th, and we will begin, Mr. Prieto, with item number 1.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Item number 1 relates to presentation by Department of Water and Power in regard to its 2013 Power Integrated Resources Plan to meet the city's future energy needs and related matters. We have staff from Department of Water and Power.
Very good. I think we'll begin just by having you all introduce yourselves and give us the presentation. I imagine there's going to be a lot of conversation, at least questions for me, with respect to the IRP. So if you would please begin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Aaron Benjamin. I'm the Senior Assistant General Manager in charge of the power system, and I have 2 staff members with me.
My name is Mike Webster. I am Assistant Director of our Power System Planning and Development.
Eric Tharp. I'm the Director of Fuel and Power Purchase.
If you're okay, we'll start with, we have a brief presentation, PowerPoint, and we're ready to take questions after that. So,
just as I said, go ahead.
The first introduction is we're going to cover the plans for the power system, and I just want to mention that the next 15 years is probably the most intense years that the power system will see in respect to the replacement and renewal of the resources as we've known for many, many years, many decades before this transformation period that we're going to go through. With all these things that we have in place, the number 1 priority for the power system is to make sure, as we're putting all these plans together, that the reliability of our system is maintained, and we always have the high reliability and the service levels that we are known for. So as we go through these things, the reliability of the system is going to be the paramount, priority for us as we do these changes. A couple of the highlights of what the major buckets for us are is the number 1 thing is we have a very robust program of energy efficiency, and we have a target of 10% by 2020 that we are well underway to implement. We also have the mandate of 33% renewables by 2020, and we are already moving from the 20% that we are at to 25% by 2016. And we'll talk a little bit more about the projects that are basically contributing to those percentage as we move forward. And of course, rebuilding and repowering our existing power plant to get off of ocean cooling is one of the major programs that we're having in place, and we'll talk a little bit about the units that we already commissioned and they're in service, and the construction that's going on the units that we're currently repowering. One of the other major programs that we want to touch on is the elimination of coal from our resources, and currently we have 40% plus energy delivered to our system from coal, that we have plans to get off of coal 100%, but no later than 2025. And the earliest one, which is the Navajo, it's coming up, is December 2015, and we'll talk a little bit more detail about that. And like I said, as we're doing all these programs, the investment in the reliability of the power system is ongoing, and it's overarching across the generation, transmission, and distribution assets that we have. Just touching on some of the accomplishments and things that we have put in place that are in play to achieve these goals is that we are already past the 20% renewable, and we're moving towards the 25% goal. We just had the Board of Water and Power yesterday approve a purchase of a 531 megawatt of a gas-fired power plant, which is in line with our strategy to get off of coal. And this committee will be seeing it very soon, and we hope to get it through our approval process by the end of this year. Significant progress have been made on the Navajo, divestiture, and December 2015 has been our target in the IRP. We are on track to divest from Navajo, and we will bring in detailed plan to this committee on once the deal is finalized. IPP, which is a bigger power plant, we do have plans in place, and we'll talk a little bit more. That's our next chapter in getting off of coal, and a lot of activities have been in play, and we're going to move right into that implementation of that plan as soon as we get off of Navajo and finalize that plan. We have eliminated 460 million gallons per day of ocean cooling by having Unit 5 and 6 at Haynes repowered. So what we have right now is 600 megawatts of highly efficient, very flexible units that are in service right now in our portfolio, and we have taken the old 40-year-old units offline, which were using this ocean water as the medium for cooling them. We have done the groundbreaking at Scattergood Unit 3, and this is about $1 billion worth of improvements that we're doing. This is one of the largest power units that we have that uses ocean water, and by June of 2015, we would have this unit decommissioned, and the new unit will be in service. We have already reduced our CO2 emissions to 22% below 1990 levels. We have a lot of the solar programs in place, the SB1 program and the feed-in tariff. We have completed 12 contracts under the feed-in tariff program. It's about 8 megawatts of subscription that we have under that, and we have a lot of these projects in the pipeline for us to get to the 150 megawatts of feed-in tariff. We have the geothermal projects, the solar projects, and you could go through the list of the accomplishments, the efficiency programs that we have in our residential, commercial, and also LAUSD partnership with the gas company to make sure we have the home improvements when it comes to insulation and efficiency measures on the residential sector and also the commercial sector. And one thing that you're going to see in the integrated resource plan that's different than the previous 4 plans that we have put in place is that we have included the integrated human resource plan in all those things that we're doing, because the human capital that we have and the skills of our workforce as we move forward with all these changes, if we don't pay attention to that segment of our strategy, I think it would be an area where we would see a lot of setback as we move forward. So we put that in the front of the plan so everybody sees how the human capital integrates with all these plans that we have in place. This is a picture that you've seen before probably, but it kind of depicts the scale of the system that we have. We are in 4 states. We are in, of course, in California. We have a lot of the transmission networks, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. And these are all transmission lines that LA Water and Power controls under its balancing authority. We bring energy from all these sources to LA currently. But one of the strategies that we have been moving forward with is, as we get off of coal, is to use the existing transmission line without creating the need for building new lines in our system, is to use the existing lines as means for us to bring renewables into the LA area without really upgrading or changing the network of transmission lines that we have. You'll see on the right-hand side of the slide, you see the Navajo Generating Station, which we are 21% owners. It's in Page, Arizona, and this is the power plant that we will be out by December 2015. We talked a little bit about the Apex gas plant. Our board approved it yesterday. That's a new purchase to replace what we're getting off of, and also to use the natural gas units as a means for us to balance our systems as we increase in our percentages of renewables. That's one of the reliability issues that we want to discuss with you. Solar has been a cornerstone of our renewable portfolio, and we've added close to 500 megawatts of new contracts in place in line with these transmission lines that we have vacant capacity for us to bring those energies in, and they are, you could see it on the map. It's depicted by the Moapa Solar and the Sempra Energy Solar that we've got in 250 each. The integrated resource plan has been the cornerstone. It's been the heart of our planning process. We have we've used the document as the means for us to bring in a lot of the stakeholders, bring in the comments, to have everybody contribute to the plan that we have, not only for the immediate future, but to look forward for the next 30 years or so and see how these moving parts come together. And it's been a document that the entire power system looks for when we bring in projects for approval, is we want to be able to point to this document as the plan that we have adopted moving forward, that we've declared as our cornerstone to implement, and point to this document as the implementation moves forward and bringing these projects ahead. This slide shows the relative percentages of each of the resources that we talked about, and you could see that we're balancing the solar and the wind and the geothermal, and of course we have the small hydro in our power plant, in our portfolio, and energy efficiency as being one of the resources that basically lowers our demand, so make sure that when we hit those targets that we are including energy efficiency as part of our strategy. We've talked about the repowering, and this is something I just wanted to show you the tightness of the schedule that we have. This is changing units that we currently rely on, taking them offline, repowering them, putting them back in service, and basically doing this as we keep the system afloat. And one of the challenges that we've had, these are all existing power plants that we have in our portfolio. It's the real estate that we have. As these units are operating, we have to disengage them from the units that we're taking offline. We have to sever the relationship between the units and the controls that we have in there, modernize the part that we took out, put the new units in, integrate it with the plant, and then do this on a rolling schedule as we take these units out. And these are hundreds of millions of dollars of investment that we're doing to modernize this. And the schedule takes us to 2029. By the end of this process, we will have zero usage of ocean water as a cooling medium for our power plants. So we'll be 100% off of ocean cooling. The two units that we talked about, Navajo Generating Station and Intermountain Power Plants, these are the two coal units, generating units that we have. And we've talked about the timeline for this. Navajo by December 2015, IPP is no later than July of 2025. So we've already shaved 2 years off of the contract years. We have contracts that are being approved by the owners. 23 Utah cities are going to their respective councils and they're approving it. LA, of course, has approved it. Our council has approved the plan moving forward. We have other participants that are taking it to their respective. Once we have all of them approved, then we will have a plan in place for us to trigger to get off of coal anytime between the time that we have the contracts in place till 2025. No later than 2020, we must have a design in place for us to take these units offline and put in whatever technology is available at that time to make the replacement power. We've talked about this slide several times, but it's worth mentioning that as we take coal off our system, there's no one-to-one relationship between the coal and the gas. And you can see the stacking order that we have is for every megawatt of coal that we take off of our system, we want to make sure that we invest money in efficiency first, renewables second, and then whatever the balance from the physics to balance the system, we will acquire gas units for us to balance the system out. And that's been our strategy, and that's what we want to implement. One thing to mention, and as we do this transformation, you can see that by 2026, you can see the gray area on top of the pie chart. We have coal in the slices out there, but 2026, that slice is gone. There's no coal in our portfolio. But our Palo Verde nuclear power plant, our large hydro, our renewables, and our gas would be the making up for that loss that we have in the energy. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the zero-emission resources that we have, including Palo Verde, large hydro, and renewables. will take the average of the portfolio that we have and the profile of our generation, will almost reduce our CO2 footprint in half. So these are some of the things that we want to put in place in order for us to further reduce our usage of fossil fuels and move into more renewables and more of a reliable system as we take some of these legacy systems offline. This is another depiction of the resources that the pie chart showed, and you could see from the bottom of the chart going upwards, you could see the large hydro, the Hoover Dam generation, the Palo Verde nuclear, the in-basin generation, the existing renewables, and as you move into the timeline, the coal segment of our portfolio disappears, and a lot of the other resources that we talked about steps in and makes up the system for LA. One of the things that we want to talk about, we've discussed in the IRP, is the modernization of our system. So smart grid, communication, consumer behaviors are changing, electric vehicles, efficiency, implementation of behavior, customer behaviors, and demand response to make sure that we need, when we need the customers to be participating in a program, when we need the energy the most, that they are part of a program that we could integrate into our system. While we are putting all these systems in place, one of the things that basically keeps me awake at night is the security of the system. So we are doing a demonstration of these technologies as we put these electronics devices in there, and cybersecurity is one of the top priorities. We have to make sure whatever we deploy is deployed, it's consumer friendly and safe for the system. And lastly, just to talk, we talked about the integrated human resource plan. Just to give you a magnitude of what we're talking about, because we do have an aging workforce in the utility, and each profile, what we've done is we've run the model of each of the skill sets that we have, from anywhere from the lineman to the engineer to the instrument tech to the operator to the support functions, and figured out the profile of the exit of the workforce that we have. This is not to alarm, but to be proactive, to make sure that we are not caught by surprise as we see the dwindling of the workforce. And not only replacing the workforce, what we want to do is be very, very strategic in recruitment, training, and hiring the right skills as we move forward into our implementation project. Because the system is different, it's going to be different than what we're used to before. It's going to be much more technologically driven. It's going to be different mixes of resources that we have. We want to make sure that the workforce that we have in the future meets that challenge as we move forward. A couple of milestones that kind of we want to talk about. The Barren Ridge Transmission Project is one of those renewable projects that we have in place. This is the date is in the past. Our board has approved the design-build ordinance request, and it's coming through this committee and through our governing, to our council. We have, yesterday was the day that the Apex power plant was approved. The Navajo Generating Unit plan that we are looking at January of 2014 to bring something to this committee and have a plan to exit Navajo. We have the solar projects that are coming through this committee also. We have the Energy Efficiency Potential project coming through, and then we have the Beacon Solar, the bundled program, that also going to be coming through this committee. We also have the request to extend the participation agreement on Palo Verde that's also pending to be approved. That's not on this list, but I wanted to mention that also. In your packet, you will see, if you don't remember anything that we went through, and I know there's a lot of information in there, in your packet at the last page, you have a bigger scale page attached to your packet. Basically what this does is it summarizes everything I talked about in one page. So when you look at the top of your page, you'll see a bunch of these programs and the projects that I talked about on the time scales. You'll see the composition of our resources on the next box. You'll see the reduction of the CO2 goals that we have in place. You'll see the energy efficiency that we have as we move forward, because energy efficiency it's just like having a power plant for us. We need to have that as part of a mix. Our ocean cooling water usage, these step downs, you can see every time we put a unit in online, you can see a drop in the usage of the gallons per day in there. We have the RPS goals, and we want to go from 20 to 25 by 2016 and 33% by 2020. We have the integrated human resource plan that shows the exit of our workforce and what we're doing in order for us to supplement the hiring and the training. And then we have the rate impacts, and this is not a rate case, but just kind of gives you an idea of the cost associated with all these programs that we have to move forward. So I think this is a useful summary of everything we've talked about. And our integrated resource plan for 2013, it's being finalized, and it will be posted by January of 2014. It will be online for everybody to see. But this is something that we're going to do on an annual basis. So we've done it now. This is the 4th year. We've gone through the cycle of updating the IRP. But we always look back on what we said we're going to do, what we've done, what changes we've made, and then project that for the next 30 years. So it's been something that we want to keep on doing to make sure our governing bodies is informed of what we plan on doing, what we've done, and what the future holds. So with that, I conclude my presentation.
Very good. Thank you for that presentation. Why don't I go to my members first before I ask questions? Mr. Koretz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And once again, I want to thank DWP for all the amazing work and actually getting off coal and making this happen. I think it's a landmark action that hopefully other places will replicate. One question, are we committed to making these plants, getting these plants replaced by gas-fired plants, or are there other possibilities? Is that 100% commitment already? Because I thought we weren't necessarily committed to that.
We want to minimize, but as I mentioned, from the balancing, from the physics of balancing a system, we have to have a dispatchable resource that makes the transmission work and makes our system work. Right now, as we run our models, having gas-fired power plants in our mix is essential for us to integrate renewables, because from simple network of energy coming into our system, solar by itself and wind by itself doesn't have the mass for it to come into our system with these long transmission lines that we have coming in. So it is an essential function of our stability.
Hey, can I give an example? For example, the coal plant at Navajo is 477 megawatts and has an 80% or actually nearly a 90% capacity factor. If we go forward with the Apex plant, it's about 500 megawatts. Because we've deployed renewables, the capacity factor out of that plant is about 20%. So we've gone from coal to renewables, and then it's supplemented with natural gas. So it's not a one-for-one, and it's the capacity that's important for those key critical days when you need the capacity. So that's a real example that kind of shows that it's not a coal for gas play.
Drill down on that for us, because I find that a lot of folks don't sort of understand what balancing means and how it is that you have to, in my opinion, pair the renewable product with something that is a little bit more stable, that actually has the inertia to move those electrons through the system. So help drill down on that point a little bit, because I think that's very important for people to understand.
Good question.
Okay, so there's really
what a healthy mix is, and why we actually have to do it, and why we can't be 100% solar or 100% geothermal or 100% any one renewable.
Okay, so there's really three integration factors that we need to think about. One is, how do you balance the system? And we have to recognize that wind fluctuates up and down. And so the same with solar, especially if you have cloud movement over the summer, is that as the clouds come over and that solar drops off, you need something that can pick up that energy immediately. And as those clouds go away, it has to be reversed. So you always have to be in perfect balance every millisecond at every point in time when we're delivering energy. So that's one area of integration that's absolutely critical, is have that generation following mode. Another reason it's critical is that, for example, solar has no rotating mass, so there's no inertia. And it's a little bit like a garden hose, that if you want to spray a garden hose, you have to have some pressure through that to spray that water out. Electrons are really the same way. You have to have a rotating mass that's pushing those electrons through the transmission grid. So if we were to take Navajo and get rid of that completely and put just solar, there's nothing that's going to get those electrons into the system. And so, for example, a combined cycle plant or a quick start gas turbine type plant provides that rotating inertia to actually push those electrons through the system. And then really the last area is locally, which is really something we're trying to get our arms around, is that as solar fluctuates, you create these voltage instabilities locally. And so how do you back up that local stability and voltage? And we're working through studies and we're trying to figure that out. And there's various technologies that we can use to do that.
So there's a real-life graph that we look at every 4 seconds of what happens on generation. The supply electricity is such that you have to generate and consume it instantaneously, regardless of the small storage capacities that we have. When we have one wind farm that generates 200 plus megawatts of energy when it's at its peak. And then instantaneously, when the wind stops, that drops into zero instantaneously within several seconds. When that drops, that 200 megawatts of generation, which was supplying energy to 200,000 homes, must be replaced by a dispatchable unit that's on a standby. And these units that we have, so the CO2 emissions from that instantaneous push of a button where we make up that energy for that half an hour that the wind just went from very, very high level to zero, is when we get those units up and running. And when the wind picks up again, we back off from the unit that was sitting and waiting for these dips. And as Mike mentioned on the cover for the solar, we see we're learning as we put these systems online, and we're learning how they're behaving. And we're trying to modify the system to make sure that at any given moment we don't put the system at jeopardy and not have enough resources on standby to make up for all these losses.
And again, on natural gas, it's a pretty volatile fuel price-wise. How do we manage the volatility of that?
So we have several ways that we have physical hedges, financial hedges, and we have that our council has approved a risk management policy that we abide by. We have a quarterly report that we generate on how we manage that risk. It is a volatile commodity, that we manage. We have a risk executive committee and we have a working committee. We have a structure in place to manage that risk.
Okay, on another topic, I know we're looking at solar, wind farms, etc. Why do we not do more local solar on rooftops rather than farms that may also have some environmental impact?
So what we were doing originally when we set the goal of 150 megawatt feed-in tariff in conjunction with the solar incentive program, which is the solar gets installed behind the meter instead of in front of the meter, so it's benefiting the customers. We were looking at our circuits, and we were trying to set what a safety factor would be, and about 15% of a circuit is what we think that solar can handle. And so the 150 megawatts really came from that. Is what we don't want to do is have so much solar on any one circuit that it's backfeeding into the system and actually creating reliability problems and voltage problems for that entire area. So the 150 is kind of industry standard, if you will, that we felt that it would be safe to deploy. Now, could we do more? Certainly we could do more on a very specific basis with studies to make sure that the investment in the local infrastructure can handle those upgrades. But it will be very case-by-case specific analysis to make sure that we can do that to keep the system reliable.
So you can't do unlimited local solar without building a greater infrastructure.
Our system was built to deliver electrons one direction, and it wasn't built so that electrons were pumped back into the system. So all of our circuit breakers and our set points and things like that, all of that has to be redesigned and modernized in order to allow that. So a safe place was the 150 megawatts, deploy that, learn from that, and then grow from that depending on what our ultimate goals are and what our rates will support.
Okay, and on the energy efficiency, that strikes me as probably the least ambitious of our goals. Why couldn't we shoot for a number higher than 10%? Why wouldn't that be practical?
Okay. What we are looking at that is that the 10% was originally based on older, what's called maximum potential studies. So they look at what technologies are available and what makes cost-effective sense. And so that report said 10%. But we're working on that report that Aram referred to that's coming out next spring, which we think will show a much higher potential that's economic. When that report comes out, then in the 2014 IRP, we can build those numbers in. Our board has already made the statement that they would like to get to 15% if it's based on a technical study and it's economically viable, and that's what this report will show. I don't know if it's 14% or 14.5% or 15%, but that's going to guide us in what we deploy in the future.
And I think that's a good approach, because as you said, it's in some ways it's almost like adding a power plant. The only difference is you're not having any negative environmental impacts, you're not tapping any resources. So doing it by conservation and efficiency seems to be a win-win for everybody. The more you can do it, the better off we are.
One of the things, Council Member, that you need to know also is that as an energy company, we use energy to move energy into different areas. Our efficiency is being studied also as just like synchronizing the traffic lights, to make sure that when we're turning on and off units and moving energy from one part of the city to the other, that we, as the energy company, we're using the systems efficiently. So that's an area also that we've done the studies. We've looked at the infrastructure needs that we have to make sure that we don't waste any energy as we deliver energy to the consumers.
And one last point on another subject. I know you're looking at hiring folks and the projected decline. I don't know if you've taken into account the recent settlement that makes it more difficult because of reciprocity being factored in, more difficult to get qualified people from City Hall to move over, which has been a significant source of people for DWP in the past.
Our integrated resource plan is going to lay out a lot of strategies for us to get that. One of them is including tapping into the military segment, returning home, hiring trained load dispatchers, operator, mechanics, and tapping into that kind of a recruitment effort that we want to put in.
Very good. Thank you.
I apologize, there's another committee, but I want to thank
Mr. Lavange.
Power. I just want to ask one second, because you mentioned trade tech, I think, a minute ago there. Do you have pole trading? I just wanted to see that there. I know there's one in Century Boulevard, is that correct, in Watts?
And it's on our receiving station, yeah. There's a Maxine Waters training facilities.
Right, but do you have a sign up there that says we hire and train people? That's the thing I want to see up there, that encourages those who live in the community. There's an opportunity with DWP.
Yes.
And one thing, members, that I'm proud of is how you train your own people, and the safety factor that you have a high regard for, that is real important. I see more cones at a cone zone at a DWP job than all the other jobs combined, which is good, because safety is a real important factor. But on these other issues here, on the power issue there, I wanted to just say that keep it coming, but blend it out so you get more green. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thanks. And I certainly agree with my colleagues and express the same sentiment and keep it going, and we want to see more green, and that's wonderful, and we like the way that you're going in that direction. I did two sort of general questions. One is along the lines of what my colleague, Mr. Koretz, was talking about in terms of the feed-in tariff. I don't see it sort of scheduled out. You mentioned, 150 megawatts is sort of the pilot to see how that goes, and I've always been a big fan of seeing you really trying to push that. I've seen in other countries where they actually, they're incentivizing it to a much greater degree. And so what would it take to get us to build into this plan a system so that we can start building the circuitry so that we can make distributed power more economically feasible, and we can really see, because I think once we unleash that and it becomes an incentive for people out in the public to generate power, and I know that's not the way we like to think generally at the power companies, but we'll see radical change, and it'll be a lot easier to get all that renewable. So I guess, is there a way to get that into this document and into this system so that we see the growth?
We have, Councilmember, you'll see in the IRP several programs that we're putting in place, public buildings. I know Councilmember Labange has mentioned it several times, libraries, public buildings, to make sure every
Recreation and parks.
Every surface that the city owns, whether it's a landfill or empty lot, and that we are not using right-of-ways, public facilities, that we have a plan. The staff has been prioritizing these, to make sure that we go by order of the impact, cost-benefit impacts. Again, the budget is a limitation, how much we can do. But in the plan, you will see a lot of these programs and how they contribute to that solar sliver that you saw.
But if I understood what you were saying earlier, that we're up against a physical limitation of 150 megawatts that would be safe to have distributed power. Otherwise, the circuits don't know which direction they're going or something to that effect. And you said we'd have to rebuild some of the infrastructure. And I'm not a technician. I take your word for it, of course. So the question is, how do we go about rebuilding that infrastructure so that we can go beyond the physical limitation that we're under now?
As part of the power reliability, we're doing cable replacements, we're doing poles and wires and transformer. We're resizing these transformers. We're building the electric model, basically taking every point that we have in our system and modeling it. So when we add these distributed generation into our system, we know the impact on our system to make sure that it doesn't cause any reliability issues as we keep on adding these distributed generation to our system. And also we have to keep our workers safe, the public safe, because of the potential for these things to be a safety issue. We've done a great job, I think, with collaborating with Building and Safety and us, and making sure that we take care of the inspection properly, to make sure the safety nets are there. The protocol is there for us to. As we're rolling these programs, we're making sure that these are done in a phased manner and safe manner going forward.
I guess maybe not for here, but it's down the road. I'd love to drill down on that a little bit more to see what we can do as a city, as a council, to make sure that we're not being limited by the physics of it. That there's the political dynamic and there's the cost-benefit dynamic, but that the sort of what often frustrates me as we're pushing toward this is, well, we can't do it because the infrastructure just isn't there. And so I want to make sure that we're looking ahead as far as that goes and doing everything we can to make sure that that's not a limitation. And related to that question is the other issue of storage. You mentioned, it always seemed like that's the holy grail for renewable energy. And that we have limited storage capacity, but that we have to have these non-renewables because we don't have the large storage capacity. What are we doing at this point so that we can sort of get to that holy grail, and how would that change the dynamic if we invested more in storage capacity?
So we do have sort of we have the pump, the Castaic, a pumping hydro pump that we use as sort of a storage. It's 1,200 megawatts of a storage, but at night what we do is we take the energy that otherwise we would have curtailed and used to move the water up to the reservoir and use it during the day. That's has been acting as our storage facility, but the physical battery technologies. There's been experimentation, in wind farms, kind of combining sort of like a hybrid type engines, with the wind and the solar to make sure that when excess is there, that could be stored and dispatched at a different time. We have a section in our IRP that looks at that. Our smart grid implementation has been experimenting with technologies that we could use right now to use like the electric vehicles as part of our storage. But all those things right now from a scale of a utility is not something we could say that it could be deployed safely and be part of our dispatch order.
You even read about people, some areas basically making ice and using that as an energy storage mechanism. I mean, there's so many possibilities.
We've looked at there's several of these storage type projects, rails, elevation, having weights, as generating facilities. We've looked at the existing wells that we have in the LA area for us to use that weight going in and out of the wells as a means for us to generate microgeneration in those stations. Every opportunity we have to use storage capacity, because that's what's going to be added to our portfolio as we get more solar and more wind, and we want to balance. We need to have this kind of basically parking the energy somewhere where we could dispatch it at a different order than otherwise. Right now, our dispatch order right now is to take every renewable as it comes. We do not curtail, unless it's a safety issue. We do not curtail renewables. We back down all the fossil and everything else, and the priority is for the zero fuel cost renewables coming in first.
And I guess I would say, as Mike and Aram have mentioned, we're learning as we go, both with storage and the feed-in tariff. We'll get smarter every year with what we can do and what will work, and technology will get better every year. And that's why our integrated resource plan is redone every year, so that we can adjust and put in things we've learned over the past. So I think we will see more over time, and as we learn, it will be incorporated into our plan.
Mr. Wiesner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have listed here that we're going to go for a solar power purchase agreement in March 2014, and then the Beacon bundled solar development in April 2014. And we did, I think, two big ones last year, the solar power, and both in Vegas, right? I think one of the things we missed out on and a lost opportunity was to link that with economic development in LA, for example. How can we incentivize them to manufacture the solar panels here in Los Angeles and start thinking ahead about locations where they can do that? Can we integrate that into these purchase agreements?
Part of this council member that we've structured, I don't know if we've talked about it in detail, but Beacon Solar is about 70 miles northwest of LA towards Highway 14. We've purchased about 2,500 acres of the land that was disturbed land, that was permitted for renewables, that was purchased by DWP as part of this project. And it's capable of putting 250 megawatts of solar on our land. So what we've done is the bundled program basically does the economic development tied in LA tied to that project. So what we've done is we've put an RFP out for developers to come in, and it's like building housing pads, with the roads and the fire protection and the lines in there, with the pad being the part that we're giving to the contractors to come in and put the solar plants in there. But part of the deal that we are going into is for every megawatt that they put in there, they must do equivalent in-basin generation, one quarter of that needs to be in LA. So that's what the bundle comes from. So if a contractor gets 200 megawatts of solar on that land that we own, they must come to LA and put 50 megawatts of in-basin solar in LA, using LA contractors, using LA suppliers to get that project done. So that was a way for us to get the best pricing as we invigorate the economic growth in LA with the contractors and the suppliers that otherwise would not have that capacity, because these large developers would come in with the legal staff and the administrative staff and all the capacity that they have to bring in these big players, the Costcos and the Kmarts and people that have the rooftops. They will go in and take those rooftops as available space, turn around and subcontract with the small contractors or medium contractors, local contractors, to go and install and put those units in service. So that's what we put in place. That's what you see there in March.
What about the manufacturing of the panels themselves? You know, on DWP land, we have an incubator which we're hoping to support clean tech industry in the Arts District of downtown LA. Any possibility of incentivizing the actual manufacturing of the solar panels here in LA?
We've looked at the incentive and doing an incentive. The economics with that is that you must have a commitment for a large amount of megawatts that you would buy from that production, and our procurement processes and the way the pricing is being, every time we've run the numbers on those, it's a commitment. It's a commitment that must be made for many, many years to come with a set pricing, because that's what's going to take for an intensive capital investment in something like that. But we have numbers, we could share that with you as far as the economics and how, but we've tried to incentivize to a point where it makes sense for us and it makes sense for the investors to come in and do it.
And our ratepayer advocate will review our previous purchase agreements to advise us as to where was the price point, how do we do in those,
yes,
and before we make decisions on future
yes,
purchases, correct? Okay. And secondly and lastly, the LA Times wrote a piece, I don't know if it was this week or last week, how the national grid will have trouble integrating the renewables. And what does that mean for DWP? Will we have the same trouble? Do we agree with that or not?
We have been aware. I mean, we have been living this for many years before even renewables were part of our portfolio, and that's part of the question I think Councilmember Koretz had is that can you run a system with renewable, and what are the pitfalls of not having systems in place for you to, because the consumer, once they flip the switch, they don't know where the source of the energy is coming from. The utility is the one that's sitting behind the scenes trying to make sure that these units are all available to come in and make sure that the supply and demand are always balanced. Yeah. And we have our Energy Control Center, because we're our own balancing authority, which means balancing authority in the utility business is like having the air traffic controller. So as things come into LA territory, we have the control of that resource coming in to the system, and we have the control of resources leaving our system. So we control the balancing of the electric utility. So we are kind of fortunate in that way because we control the generation, the transmission, and the distribution. So everybody in our system is all integrated. What you see a lot of the utilities are complaining about is that if I'm controlling one of the three parts that I just mentioned, I'm always looking before me and after me for somebody to do exactly what I want in order for me to be safe. And that's a challenge because you have three different entities controlling those generation, transmission, and distribution. And a lot of coordination happened, but a lot of anxieties out there thinking, if I need my generation side to be available for me because I'm bringing more renewables, they need to move with me on the distribution side. So we are kind of fortunate because we have all three portions controlled by LA, and that's been giving us the advantage of running the system.
And speaking of the LA Times, Mr. Labange, what was the coldest day in the city of LA He's our historian, that's why.
Well, I wanted to tell you, it almost was today, but I want to refer to the man from Princeton.
I don't know, but
Yeah. 1948 was the last time it snowed in Los Angeles City proper.
I just think that we live
48, 49.
in great Southern California with a lot of sun to do more solar power because they're making such a big fuzz about how cold it's getting. It's only in the 60s and 50s. So, anyway, side point. Thank you.
Got it. Good point.
So on that note, I mean, I think it's important, and I don't mean to sound, I don't understand the physics 100%, but if you could help the committee and the audience understand, we do have a lot of sun, but integration is a very, very challenging thing, and I'm just going to push back a little bit. Yes, we're very fortunate that we control all three elements that you mentioned in order to get the electrons to people's homes. But the challenge in balancing all of that becomes very significant if you start thinking about Bob's house has solar, mine doesn't, down the street. Those little flashes, what is it that we need, 60 beats per minute? What is
60 megahertz.
60 megahertz
Cycle.
per minute? I'm thinking of my DJing equipment. 60 megahertz per minute is stability. What happens when you have compression of that wave? What happens when you have the instability and you don't have the ability to balance all of the resources that you're talking about? What happens to the power at that point?
So we have in our energy control center that number is displayed. All our load dispatchers look at that number. We have, by law, we have to be within a certain differential of that number.
But more than law, the physics, what
the
is it that
physics.
happens if you're not within that range?
The-
And you've got wind, you've got solar, you've got geothermal, you've got nuclear, you've got everything that you've got in your portfolio right now. What happens if all of a sudden there's a giant dip or a huge increase?
So I mean, I'll let Mike has been in the energy control center. He lived that desk basically that runs this 24/7. So I'll let him explain.
Yeah, so I think the most obvious the concern is the voltage instability, is that you're going to get periods of low voltage and high voltage, and that is very damaging to sensitive electronic equipment. It also shows up in fluctuations in your light output with a dimming and brightening of the lights. And see, that's going to be something that happens locally, which is probably our biggest concern, is what happens within a very specific circuit with a lot of local solar. On a grid-wide scale, I think we have a little better handle on how to balance all of that out. But that's what happens, is that your reliability and the impact on customers is much greater when they have those voltage instability problems, and especially with industrial customers and commercial customers that count on very, very high power, high quality power.
Sure. And so, and just to pick up on a point that Mr. Blumenfield mentioned, I mean, the distributive generation idea, I think, is fantastic, provided that the infrastructure is there to handle it. So it's not to say that I think it's a lack of political will. It's literally a lack of circuitry to be able to handle the fluctuations. If all of a sudden Los Angeles tonight, we wave the magic gavel here, and we've got rooftop solar with the existing infrastructure on everybody's homes, how do you balance all of that? Right, because a cloud is going to fly over my house, somebody else's house. Now I've got to ramp up. The two-way sort of capability of moving electrons is incredibly complicated. So even though I think it's critical that we keep moving towards that direction, it becomes a real challenge from your perspective, because you've got to keep the wave within a certain range. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's correct. And I think that what you see in the Integrated Resource Plan is steady and consistent growth, so that what we can do is learn, put in development and infrastructure improvements, and get to that next level. So while we're talking about some level of 150 megawatts, that's not necessarily a hard cap, but it just gets harder, and we need to be smarter and get better and more focused, but it's a growth process. So we believe that sustainable, consistent growth is much more important in the long run, and that's what we've built into all of our plans.
Sure. So speak to us a little bit about us getting off of coal. How are we on schedule? How soon do you think we can do it? And then how do we firm and shape power in sort of a post-coal sort of world? And what kind of resources do we use? How important is Palo Verde and the potential of ramping up some of the natural gas plants in order to stabilize our sort of portfolio?
So I'll have Eric cover that. He's been leading the way with the coal replacement talks.
I mean, typically the coal plants that that are built today and the ones in our system were built with a set it and forget it mentality. So you set them, you turn them on, you don't tinker with them, you don't move them up, you don't move them down. And that doesn't work very well with renewables that fluctuate. Natural gas has a much better ability to ramp up and ramp down and to balance than coal. So as we take coal off the system, we need flexible units. That's why a part of what we're doing at the ocean cooling, when we're taking old units off and replacing them with new, all the new units we put on have to be better at integrating renewables than what we took off the system, and that's what we're doing. So it will be more difficult. It will get more challenging. Mike was at the Energy Control Center in the 80s and 90s. I think their job now and in the next 10 years will be much more difficult than it was in the past.
So, but in terms of actually sort of getting off, I mean, the schedule seems to say that we're on schedule for getting off of coal.
Yes.
What are some of the potential speed bumps along the way? I mean, does it seem like we're going to be moving off of it? And what are we doing to prepare for that in terms of ramping up some of these other resources? How important is Palo Verde in order to firm up all of these resources?
So Palo Verde is, as Eric mentioned, is a critical element of our base load. So Palo Verde has a very high capacity factor and very high availability factor. The only time the units go down is when the fueling happens in those units, and we rely on those megawatts to stack up our energy needs. And it's in our models for the next till 2044, when the license has been renewed till 2044. Those are part of our resources in order for us to have that base load in our portfolio so we can stack all the other units on top. As far as the coal units, so January of 2014, we will bring to you the plan for Navajo, which is 4 years sooner than 2019. By law, 2019 is the end of our contract at Navajo. We have put self-imposed deadline on ourselves to get off of December 2015, and Apex gas plant that you saw on the list is basically a replacement for Navajo. So we're already moved forward with the acquiring of that unit for us, which gives us the flexibility, because the difference between a coal, as Eric mentioned, the coal and the gas unit that we've had is the coal units are meant, they're not meant to be cycled. So they're meant to be set on a certain megawatt generation and leave them 24/7. They can be on for months without really cycling them. The gas unit that we've bought is much more advanced technologically. It's advanced units. We can cycle them without really stressing the units, and that's exactly what we need in order for us to balance. As the example I brought is all of a sudden we have a drop in the generation because we can't control when the sun shines and the wind blows. We have to have those units on an automatic control that will be available on a very short notice to ramp up very quickly. So as an example, the old units we had, it took us 3 days to fire them up because they're old technology, so we had to fire the boilers. In contrast of that, the new units we have, we push a button, within 10 minutes we are at the limit of our generation. That's a massive change in the capacity that we have. Flexibility, fuel efficiency, and responsiveness of these units are day and night different from the units that we had.
So do this new technology, these new units that we're going to bring into the fleet, will that help us prevent the opportunities, the pitfalls of having too much sort of renewable? Let's say the sun is blazing one day. We've read, in my experience in the state legislature, when I chaired Utilities and Commerce, sometimes you have to offload that energy and actually pay people to not produce it. This sort of rapid ramp-up capability of this generation that we're purchasing into the fleet, is that going to prevent those sort of situations where we are going to end up paying to offload some of the excess energy?
We want to avoid paying people to curtail, and we don't want to curtail ourselves. We do have the capacity to curtail, like I said, on the wind generation. We do have a capacity and controls for us to stop the generation. We don't want to do that because that's wasted megawatts. But as we part of the questions that you had about the infrastructure and how we phase these in, we want to avoid the scenario where we have too much generation, uncontrolled generation, and no demand. It's like Germany has gone through, where on a Sunday afternoon they had to pay people to take their energy because they're generating and nobody can curtail the generation. So their system was off balance, that they had to offload it and pay people. We're started to see that in the market a little bit on the wholesale side, but we want to avoid it when it comes to the distributed generation.
Sure. And, the impact on the rate base obviously is incredibly important to all of us. So understanding that we're expediting the divestiture of coal, what does that mean? Do we have people who are, without getting us into any sort of trouble with the sale, do we have folks that are interested in it? Are we going to be able to get out of it earlier and not cost the rate base any more than we otherwise would have if we had extended, or rather lived through the end of the contract?
We have the risk factor for us to that time that we're buying from 2015 to 2019 is basically an insurance policy to make sure that all these deals are sealed and behind us and have a replacement power like we're executing. So we do have a party that we're talking with. We are well into the details of the deal. January 2014 is around the corner, and we're very confident that we will bring to this board, to this council, a deal that's good for the ratepayers, it's good for us. It has bought us that insurance policy that we're not going to be jammed last minute where we have to get off by law and we don't have a runway for us to make plans. This is the best and the safest way for us to divest from coal, replace with renewables, get the efficiency done, and make sure that we don't get caught in the middle of a timeline.
I could go on for a long time, colleagues. I don't know if anybody has any additional questions. I have a lot of interest in sort of rates and how the IRP at least is going to forecast the potential on the rate hikes. But I think I can wait until I meet with you all in preparation of those conversations. I don't know if anybody has any additional questions.
No, I just wanted to thank Mr. Benjamin when I slipped my point on public buildings. Our libraries, our rec centers, all that, their operating costs go up. If we could get that, it's key. And then also, Mr. Chairman, if you live on one side of the street, your availability of the sun may be different than the other side in the hillside area. So life is not fair, nor is solar power. Meaning if it hits Eric's house before it hits Debbie's house, that's what happens. You live on the upside of the hill or the downside of the hill. So there's advantages or disadvantages, and I don't know how you make it equal when you mentioned that point, but having that be said. And also, you have the most important DWP facility in your district.
I do, Sun Valley.
Yeah,
well, actually, it's CD6.
No. What's in Verdugo Hills right there? That's yours. That's where the
control center is in.
The control center.
Yeah, you got to know that, Councilman. You got to know that.
That's supposed to be secret.
You got to know that.
You can't tell people where the balancing authority is. It's dangerous. Okay, very good. And listen, I think, to Mr. Blumenfield and Mr. Weezar's sort of points, this is it's an exciting time because the ability to transform the portfolio and the loading order for the utility, I think, is a tremendous opportunity for Los Angeles, not just for the consumer, but potentially for our local economy. I mean, this is the absolute cornerstone to our success, your ability to provide dependable, reliable, inexpensive energy. And so the question becomes, how soon can technology get caught up with us so that we can actually, hopefully, do all that we want to do and not cost the rate base a tremendous amount of shock when we have to pay for it. So I couldn't be more excited to serve on this committee than I am with all of the potential there. That being said, I would invite my colleagues, if you haven't been to a power plant, it may not be the most exciting trip, but I have been to gas-fired plants, and they're very, very interesting. I have not been to a nuclear plant, and the ones through cooling I think is sort of moot now, so I don't think I need to go see one of those. But who's seen a power plant up close? Flipped a couple of switches, worn a hard hat? Yeah, inside. All right, Sun Valley, here we come. Very good. There are some speaker cards. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Chair, might suggest, because maybe one time in the future we have a committee meeting out there.
Absolutely. I like that idea.
We'll be glad to host it.
So ordered, Mr. Labange. All right, we're going to go ahead and take some public comment here. Daryl Gale. and Wendy Legacki, if I'm pronouncing that properly, come up to the center table. We'll go ahead and take, since we've got 4 chairs there, Evan Gillespie and Ronnie Solomon. I recognize that some of you folks are from the same organization, so please try your best to not repeat yourself, and if somebody beforehand has said all that you want to, just concur. Thank you very much. We'll start with Evan, followed by Ronnie, followed by Wendy, and then Daryl.
Appreciate it. And how much time do we have?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, great. So really appreciate the dialogue today. My name's Evan Gillespie. I'm a deputy director for the Sierra Club on our Beyond Coal campaign. So I manage campaigns across the West, helping utilities transition from coal to clean energy. I want to say a couple of things about DWP and the IRP, and then talk about some of the specific issues that were addressed today, and I'll try to touch on them quickly. First off, credit to the Department of Water and Power. This is the 4th IRP now I've been through with them, and we work with a lot of utilities who do an integrated resource plan. They put it on a shelf, and then the whole thing changes and they do something else. And what the Department of Water and Power has done is been really transparent about, here's what we want to do, here's why we need to do it, and then they actually go out and do it. And we don't always agree with everything that they do, but they're extraordinarily transparent and consistent about how these plans are laid out. And so it's great to see the conversation today, and it speaks to the need to really dig in and bring in a number of stakeholders to make sure that they're balancing the needs of all the different stakeholders and everything. So just want to credit DWP there, and I also want to say that they've been really receptive to taking input to how to take a technical document and make it understandable to the public. So one quick example of that is, rather than just emphasizing rates are going to go up, they talk about what it actually means for a customer's bill, and not just for your average customer, but someone who lives in a small home, someone who lives in a big home, industrial customers. They really try to break it down to understand, okay, so what does this mean for the size of the check that I'm going to write? And we appreciate that. On the integration issue, because this has come up today a lot, these are really serious problems, and they're going to require a lot of work going forward to figure out how we do it. The good news is they're solvable problems, and there are problems that the state is already addressing, and the Chair knows well the work that the PUC is doing on demand response, on energy storage. Earlier this year, the Public Utilities Commission put forth a requirement that the investor-owned utilities have to procure 1,300 megawatts of storage between now and 2020. DWP's share of that, if they were obligated, would be about 130 megawatts. So I think we can get moving on the solutions today. That doesn't mean that we know how to get to 100% clean energy today, but we can keep moving forward, and would encourage this committee to continue to look at alternatives.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm Ronnie Solomon, a constituent of Council Member Resource, CD14, and an LA Beyond coal fighter. I want to commend the LA City Council, this committee, and the DWP for your work on clean energy and getting out of coal by 2025. The principal goal of an IRP is to manage risk, and we are concerned that the overdependence on natural gas is both bad for the climate and environment and a very risky situation for DWP customers. DWP's plans to replace most of the coal with natural gas at this point could be risky. I think in the IRP it has a percentage 8% below the 2011 level, which should be the cost of natural gas in 2030, and we're not sure that that will be the case. It might go way up. I saw a front-page LA Times article the other day cautioning us about hurrying too quickly in the direction of more renewable energy, saying the grid won't be reliable and we may face massive blackouts. I worried immediately that this hogwash was being promoted by the coal, oil, and gas industries. How dare we even consider slowing down our awesome progress toward a full use of renewables? The time is now. If we don't move on expanding our renewable portfolio right now as a city, state, nation, and planet, we're going straight off a cliff into an unlivable world. And in your heart of hearts, you all know this. We in Los Angeles rebuilt part of the Santa Monica Freeway ahead of schedule after an earthquake. We can do this. Our LADWP can do this. Let's move our targets closer. Let's rid ourselves of not only coal, but eventually natural gas, maybe a little more gradually, but get rid of it. We have tons of sun, lots of wind, and the science and technology required for reliable energy storage. Let's harness all we can to power the rest of our century and millennium with renewable energy, and let the IRP and the future IRPs reflect this intention. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Wendy Legacki. I'm in CD1, which is close to Weezer. And I also was very concerned about the LA Times article yesterday. It sounded like we might as well give up and not even bother with any kind of renewables. Germany has a great renewable program, and so does Western Iowa, that gets 80% of their energy from renewables. And I know, as well as Ronnie, that the LADWP can figure out a way to store this energy and to make it work. And I'm concerned, and I would like to see the City Council or the DWP put in an article into the LA Times so that I don't have to be arguing with my friends about why we need renewables, and having them tell me, well, I'm sorry, we can't do it, we'll have blackouts. And I also am concerned about all the fracking, and, you know, we don't want to live near fracking
I'm sorry,
space.
if you could just speak to the IRP, because that's what's
Okay.
agendized today.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Next.
Hi, I'm Daryl Gale. I live downtown in Councilman Weezer's district. I live in a solar apartment, and I wish everybody could live or work in LA in a solar apartment. If you have a flat roof, a solar building. If you have a flat roof or if you have a parking lot, we can put solar everywhere. And it would be really neat if the city council would promote that and make all the city and public buildings solar. So I just want to tell you, it's wonderful to live guilt-free with solar. And the other thing is I did participate in the last IRP public meetings, and I hope that the DWP will have more IRP meetings for this coming fiscal year. And I hope that they will have a survey like they did last time, because I did participate in that, and they will have plenty of information in Spanish. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Hearing and seeing no additional further comment, that item will be received and filed. Mr. Prieto, thank you to the department again for coming out and help us understand what the IRP, at least for 2014, is going to look like. Mr. Prieto, item number 2.
Number 2, motion Labange Weezer relative to the DWP and working with organizations such as WETAB to report back on a comprehensive plan to upgrade, restore, and bring back public water fountains.
Very good. Thank you for being here, Mr. Labange. Mr. Koretz, I know that you were particularly interested in this item. For the record, gentlemen, if you could tell us your name and the organization that you represent.
Good afternoon, council members. Alvin Bautista, Water Executive Office Engineer for LADWP Water System.
Good afternoon. Albert Gastelum, Director of Water Quality, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power.
Tom Gibson, Landscape Architect, Department of Recreation and Parks.
Very good. And as you all remember the motion, if you could help inform the committee of where we are in terms of having water fountains. Is that right, Mr. Labange? Water fountains. How many do we have? Where are they?
Glad to do that. Chairman Fuentes, let me get started. On behalf of DWP, I have a prepared written statement I'd like to share with your committee. Yes, Councilmember Labange. I get started? First of all, LADWP is very excited that public attention and hopefully public opinion is being focused on tap water, primarily because we've always served the highest quality water here. We do, however, continue to fight an uphill battle with public perception and the ease and popularity of bottled water. There is a large infrastructure issue of providing and increasing our residents' access to water fountains. In this particular case, it's important for DWP to work and participate in partnerships with other agencies, including non-city agencies. This is already occurring with partnerships and discussions with First 5 LA, the California Endowment Advocacy Groups, as well as the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health regarding a city and countywide effort to increase access to and consumption of tap water. Mr. Albert Gastelum, Director of Water Quality for the DWP's water system, has been spearheading our efforts in these areas and is here to answer any questions. But we know that more yes?
I just wanted to say to the committee member, over the course of time, things have changed. There's challenges. There's vandalism, which is a big issue there. Also, there's great need. Some people where they bathe in public fountains, et cetera, et cetera. But if we accept what has happened, we'll never change what we can. And I wanted to bring this to our attention. But also, we have some very good people from WeTap who are here today.
Right.
And we want them to speak to it as well. This is a picture of the wonderful Mulholland Fountain, and they just put in a drinking fountain there that is so good. I'm going to pass Exhibit A here. And this is an old school sunrise shot from Griffith Observatory of a fountain, but it doesn't have the pressure that makes people want to go grab it. It used to be in Ferndale, in the western part of Griffith Park, there was a tap that everybody took and it thought it was a fountain of youth, but the health department didn't, so we had to tap the tap. But I think it's real important that we talk about that, especially in our schools. And the other thing, too, is I have no problem with people drinking any kind of water. I got it. Water's real important. We'd like people to drink more tap water in that sense, but we want to make it availability. I think Mr. Gibson, who's one of the creative engineers, architects from Reckitt Parks, could add on the Reckitt Park side. But I don't, can you get a glass of water, from a fountain in front of 111 North Hope Street?
Yes.
Which is great. So we should do that there. And this is just a tip of the day. This is a bottle that you get, and you finish the milk, you fill it full of Los Angeles' greatest water, and you put it in your ice box, and the next day you drink it.
Bravo.
You save some for the fishes, huh?
There's no fish in the DWP water. It's all good. But the point is, it's amazing what happens. Sometimes our homes are old. We live in a 1939 home. So I don't know, I don't want to look at my pipes, because I know then I got to probably spend a lot of money changing the pipes out. But the point is, Jerry Gateway, the former director of Water Services, said,
My old boss.
do this and it's simple. And we could teach other people to do that and it's simple and enjoy what is our greatest gift, the water of Los Angeles. So I just would like to just hear from them. And do you have some public comment cards?
We do.
Yeah, so the public comment would be good. It's just as a campaign, and we're not going to do it overnight, but I think we should beat the drum.
Colleagues, are there any other, I know Mr. Koretz, you wanted to speak on this?
Yes. A couple of things. One, a question for our staff. It seems like kind of a scam to me that we sell to some of the water companies our tap water, and then they sell it back to us at $8 or $10 a gallon.
Yeah.
How much does it actually cost for the equivalent of that water in our taps?
A 5-gallon container that you see, the normal container that you see people filling up at filter vending stations and such, you could get that for about 3 cents filled, 5 gallons, 3 cents, LA tap water.
LA tap.
So I think certainly with that low cost and with the environmental value of avoiding the number of plastic containers that we have, I think as we look at doing this in our parks, I have a sample also to pass out.
Sample who? This is very good.
Oh, good.
Of a water fountain that's focused on the ability to fill water bottles, and you can see that there. And I would think that might be something that
Tom, why don't you go ahead?
Something we should look at so that, and it looks like you've anticipated that certainly, so that we with great ease can make it easy to fill those bottles. And again, we're doing good work in trying to reduce the amount of plastics in the environment with our plastic bag work, but if we could do that same thing with our water fountains, that'll be great.
Mr. Gibson, because you have over 400 parks.
We do, and we just, in preparation for today, we did a survey of all of our drinking fountains, our outdoor drinking fountains. We have 963 drinking fountains in our park system, and looking at the condition of them, about 85% of them are in good working condition, but that doesn't mean they're ADA compliant. So that kind of brings up a much larger issue for the departments, which we've been looking at. Starting this last summer, we've been analyzing every single park, every single facility or event in that park to make sure it's ADA accessible. And so what we found out in our survey is that we have 82 fully compliant ADA drinking fountains, which is the taller, the one higher up in the picture here, which is but 881 of our drinking fountains are not ADA compliant.
Why don't you pass it here? We can pass it along.
It's double-sided.
Yeah.
So we have 881 which are not compliant. So we're hoping through this program that we can put together is to basically kill two issues at once, make them ADA compliant and bring better water to the park patrons.
So you currently have a program in place?
Well, that's what part of what we're doing today, and part of our ADA compliance program will, help to solve those two issues.
Okay.
And so we'll be looking for an enhancement proposal for funding package for fiscal year 14-15, as well as working with the other advocacy groups like WeTap, SmartTap, et cetera, looking for donations, perhaps even with large maintenance programs attached to them, which could be ongoing, which the donor could get some name recognition on the fountain itself.
Can I ask our colleagues from the state, three in between me and Mr. Weezer, would it be worth to try to find someone to lead? If you could pass that to the public, will you? They can pass it around. It's light. Yeah, it's light. It's light. It's light. The question: would someone? We put CAV on cans. CRV. Excuse me. Would we want to approach this to try to push a public water campaign statewide that there would be a tap tax, WTT, and to try to get for all communities to do tap? Because I'm sure if we're not compliant, not everybody's compliant.
Oh, hardly anybody.
And I think it would be asked to see if someone would you, Bob, if you were up there still in Sacramento,
I'm not understanding what you're asking.
somebody put the CRV on. Somebody, this legislature did, right?
Yeah.
We'll put a WTT on, a WeTap tax,
So the
or whatever.
CRV is it's intended to encourage recycling, and so
Got it. So if we put it on plastic water bottles, we are encouraging water and taps and having funds for Californians to
I
make
actually
water.
think, Mr. Labange, it might have the opposite effect, because now you're encouraging people to buy bottled water where we want to encourage them to drink.
Well, you're
out
not
of a
going to
hose.
change it overnight. I would just say, I think if you're not going to get, if you had $4 million in front of you right now to do ADA on water fountains or build sports fields, you'd build sports fields.
Right. Maybe.
Okay.
I mean, I guess if we wanted to tap the CRV fund to ask to sort of encourage more sort of usage of non-bottled water or something like that. But Mr. Blumenfield was the budget chair, so I'm sure he could speak more eloquently than I could on this. But the CRV fund is very fragile, and so if you add more redemption potential to Californians, then we might break that fund.
Okay, whatever we do, should you call the governor or I? Who?
We'll call him.
Okay.
All right. So the motion asks that you all get together and help us understand how it is to take a good inventory assessment of water fountains and try to figure out how to restore and increase that. And so why don't we go ahead and ask you all to do that? And how about if you come back in 45 days and let us know how the motion's directives are going? That sound good?
Sounds
Yeah, and
reasonable.
yeah.
Mr. Weezer, did you want
I just want to
to jump in here?
Yeah, I just want to thank Councilmember Labange. Just something that seems so basic, but it needs some review. And this speaks to health. It speaks to equity when some of our kids are asking them to buy bottled water when they could get it for free at a fountain. I mean, it's just in low-income areas of our city. This is something that's really important. It may seem so basic, but we need to go on there and review this and come back with some good data and then come up with a plan to fix this because it's...
You mentioned this too, Mr. Weezer. How many businesses or water businesses in neighborhoods because they don't believe in the water?
Yeah, I mean,
You
I
know,
see
because
that.
they don't.
I
You
live
see
in
it.
Bow Heights, and
Yeah.
we see people from my neighborhood walking down. I see them all the time. They're taking a little cart with a big jug of water, going to purchase it down
Right.
the street when they could get it for free, and it's
3
just
cents a
healthy
gallon.
or healthier, and we gotta change. It's also an education issue, right? I mean, I know DWP does that. I get some pamphlets in the mail once in
Correct.
a while that says, your drinking water is just as safe, so that's good. Got to make sure those are bilingual, et cetera. But it's education, and this is in our parks. A lot of these kids buying water instead of the fountain's right there. And they're paying $2, $3 for a bottle of water after they run the bases at a baseball game instead of just drinking some free water. So it's also education, but we do need them working first and foremost before we could even take that step.
Mr. Blumenfield?
Yeah, well, I want to echo what I've heard. I mean, a lot of it also is the way it looks. I mean, you had that picture with the old rusted one, and nobody wants to use that. It looks dirty, like there are germs on it. You got something that's fancy like this, and people are going to be more apt to use same water supply, but some of it's the aesthetic. And I really, Mr. Koretz brought up the point that I was going to bring up as well, which is that having the extra piece for the bottle refill, I think is got to be the way that we go in the future, and that we integrate that into the plan, so that we incentivize someone who may have bought a bottle of water to refill it several times. And I think you get it. You have the posters of it. It makes sense, but I just want to emphasize that needs to be part of the
Council
plan.
members, can we just request clarity on the motion to come back?
Sure. If this is okay with Mr. LeBond, I would suggest that DWP, Rec and Parks, Department of General Services report back to this committee in 45 days on the motion's directives, which are to help put together a comprehensive plan to upgrade and restore public water fountains.
Ask, too, that the CLA investigate the feasibility of tapping the CRV fee for this. You got that? Okay, good.
I just want to also clarify that public water fountains, that's a broad term. Rec and Parks is responsible for parks within the city of Los Angeles. When we talk about public water fountains, we're talking county, state, federal.
Yeah.
So just
the one's limited to the jurisdiction of the city, the great city of Los Angeles. Right. How's that?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but don't be afraid, Water and Power. Spend your money on water fountains. We'll take it.
And let me, if I may add, Mr. Chair, and it begins at home too. I have surveyed some of the fountains even within this building. A lot of them don't work. So even our own public buildings, we should also get that, survey that, and see how we should start with lead by example and have the fountains, at least in this building, start working as well.
So that'll be the order. Does that make sense? We'll play it all back for you later so you can relive this amazing moment that you had in Energy and Environment Committee. Very good.
Thank you.
There are public speakers that would like to speak on this. Elizabeth Medrano, come on up. California Food Policy Advocates, Ms. Anguiano, I think, is here. Somebody from California Food Policy. Evelyn Wendell and Andrew Douglas. Ms. Medrano.
Okay, well, I'll go first. Good afternoon, members of this committee. My name is Elizabeth Medrano. I work at the Urban and Environmental Policy Institute at Occidental College. I have been working with parents and students and teachers in LA Unified, specifically focused on school food policy. Since 2010, there's a new policy that it also actually impacts food, which is actually access to water. We are here to support this motion and moving forward with access to water, not only in schools, but in public areas all over LA. In the last year, we have been collaborating with various advocates and in LA, and focusing not only on the soda taxation, but also in focusing on the healthier option, which is water. And water, we believe, is a human right. It should be free and accessible to everyone, specifically in low-income communities where, as you have mentioned, people go to the water store and buy water, which is more expensive and it's heavy to carry. And so we have been working on a project called Waterworks, the Drinking Water Project. In collaboration with some students at Occidental College, some advocates like CFPA and others, organizations in South LA, and actually running a pilot project documenting the conditions of water fountains in specifically in Northeast LA because it's close to the college. But we want to expand that. We are currently seeking funding to create not only the access, but also education, an education component to this work, because it's very much lacking, as well as artwork where, we make water fountains more attractive, and where actually we seek input from community members as to how they think the water access or the lack of water access problem should be solved. So we are looking forward to working with you.
Great, thank you very much. I'm sorry, you didn't put your name down here for the California Food Policy Advocates?
Sorry, that was me.
Read your name for the record, please.
Ariana Oliva with California Food Policy Advocates.
Very good.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Ariana Oliva, and I'm a nutrition policy advocate with California Food Policy Advocates. We're a local nonprofit organization whose mission is to ensure that low-income individuals have access to affordable and nutritious food. So thank you today for the opportunity to speak in support of Councilmember LaBonge's motion to revitalize free drinking water in public spaces. And also thank you, Councilmember Felipe Fuentes, for your support of CalFresh and low-income nutrition. Appreciate it. Water is an essential nutrient, and making water easier to drink in public places can help mitigate the obesity crisis by replacing sugary drinks with a free, no-calorie alternative. My role at CFPA is to ensure that students have access to free, fresh drinking water during lunchtime, but also throughout the rest of the school day. And you can actually find out more information about our work at waterinschools.org. But today, it's really fantastic to see a variety of partners here that are working together to encourage tap water consumption, particularly beyond the school environment. County Public Health and others are invested in making water the new norm. So revitalizing our city's drinking fountains is a big first step in the right direction. Particularly if you focus on spaces where young children play and get thirsty, like playgrounds and recreation centers, you're more likely to change the drinking habits of future generations to come if efforts are focused on our youngest drinkers. So improving tap water access in places where food is provided, such as at summer feeding sites and after-school programs, will also further the message that water should be everyone's #1 beverage of choice. So I commend Councilmember LaBonge for your leadership on this issue, and CFPA looks forward to contributing to the city's plan to bring back the tap in 2004, and as First Lady Michelle Obama says, drink up.
Thank you. Andrew Douglas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the E&E's time on this matter. I work at the intersection of social and environmental justice, and I met Evelyn when I was working for Lauren Bond, who's a...
That's east of Olympic and Soto, right?
That's right.
You work at the intersection of... sorry, hold this down. I had to pull that one.
And you should. Well, it's interesting enough because I was going to ask... and so I was working with Lauren Bond, who's the director and trustee of the Annenberg Foundation at the time, and I was looking at different ways of different aspects of sovereignty, food sovereignty, water sovereignty. We just heard from the DWP, fantastic stuff. Hope everything keeps moving forward, but as we all know, we bring everything here. Even the palm trees are all imported here. To move forward, we've got to rethink our sovereignty as a city. And I think that as far as cost, there's certain challenges. This won't come without certain challenges, but this is like the definition of outside the box thing. This is all sorts of public-private partnerships are, Sacramento, 1 in 4 Californians lives in LA. I think that's a fair case to make to SAC to say, hey, help us out here. We need to get some water sovereignty here. And I think to speak to some of the 21st century challenges of it regarding vandalism, regarding homelessness, these things are all just challenges. That's just that. But there's not one of them that we can't outthink. There's one thing that I would like to mention, because there is a degree of geographic equity that I think is important here. And so that comes to play when we're talking about the realm of philanthropy sponsoring a drinking fountain here or a drinking fountain there. Unfortunately, that might result in a world where we have asymmetrical access to drinking fountains, where places like LACMA have fantastic drinking fountains because they have wonderful philanthropists involved, and then you have certain districts that don't. And so also in closing, I play a lot of soccer, and Granada Hills was we went up there and saw a lot of kids running around, and the average soccer player runs 7 miles during a game. And so access to drinking water it's just key as anything else. Public transportation, air. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Evelyn Wendell.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Evelyn Wendell, and I founded WeTap, which is a nonprofit that works to improve drinking fountain awareness, access, and use. And I started this, I'm a mother of 2, and I started it because really my children need drinking fountains, and when I was taking them to parks, they were broken or really just unappealing. So I urge you all to help shift the growing lack of public water confidence and access. As you know, the governor of California signed water equity bills, Senator Leno signed the bill establishing water must be available to children in schools. And other cities are adding drinking fountains, including San Francisco and Santa Monica and West Hollywood, just to name a few, and cities in Europe. So increasing public water access is a subject that we're all thinking about. And repairing old fountains is a minimal investment, in the big scheme of things, right? And adding new fountains will also be very nominal. Adding 100 new fountains and filling stations representing the 100 years of the aqueduct, wouldn't that be like a generous thing for the city? It would be amazing. So we visited over 50 parks in all the districts of LA, at least, and drinking fountains definitely need to be raised to a higher level of classification, a higher priority throughout our growing city. To address geographical equity among areas of greatest need and to promote civic stewardship, we've compiled a list of 18 parks in each of the 15 council districts that would greatly benefit from new and improved drinking fountains, and this is where I just suggest that we might want to get started. I presented a copy, so everybody has a copy of that list. The health and safety benefits are powerful reasons to consider a drinking fountain upgrade. In the Granada Hills Rec Center, which is District 12, for example, on Saturdays, approximately 500 children play soccer and 16 baseball teams are out. So along with the 700 children, there's parents and grandparents and siblings, so there's probably like 3,000 people at that park on any given Saturday. And I didn't see any fountains on the soccer field.
Great. I'm sorry, your time has expired. If you'd like to submit your comments for the record, we'll go ahead and take a look at them. Thank you very much for your testimony.
One quick question.
Mr. Weezer.
You found this in L.A. or
Yeah.
Is there other chapters in other
Pardon me?
places? Do you have chapters in other places, or is this solely in L.A.?
Well, I started in Los Angeles. I live in L.A. I was born in L.A., raised in L.A., raising my family, and I have an app that maps drinking fountains. So that's once you get into technology, it becomes, But
Very good. Thank you all for your testimony. That takes us to item number 3. Mr. Prieto?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. LaBonge.
I'm going to go to Transportation Committee because I thank you, members.
We will be here for you, Mr. LaBonge. Mr. Prieto.
Item number 3, Bureau of Sanitation report in response to motion, Bloomingfield City relative to the status of recycling programs and requirements at multifamily apartment. Mr. Chair, this matter was continued from your last meeting 2 weeks ago.
Yes, and we're did that, Mr. Blumenfield, because you asked us to continue it. This is a motion that was authored by yourself and Mr. Cedillo. We've got staff here to present. If you would please state your name for the record and present on this motion.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, members of the Energy and Environment Committee. My name is Karen Koka. I'm the Solid Resources Citywide Division Manager in the Bureau.
I'm sorry, if you all could keep it down there, make your way out of the room if you're going to have a conversation. Thank you so much. Please proceed.
With the Bureau of Sanitation. Actually, items 3, 4, and 5 are all in my shop, so I'll be introducing the staff that will be doing the presentation. For the multifamily recycling and the city's progress, Michelle Mikesell, who is the program manager for the multifamily recycling program, will be giving the report.
Good afternoon. As directed by council motion, the Bureau of Sanitation is providing this report to present the current status of recycling programs and requirements at multifamily apartment complexes in the city, including the percentage of multifamily dwellings, apartments or condo buildings of 5 or more units that are participating in recycling programs both in the city of Los Angeles as a whole and in each individual council district. In its effort to capture a larger percentage of recyclable solid waste, in 2004, Sanitation implemented a voluntary pilot multifamily recycling program. The pilot program was the first phase of a permanent citywide multifamily recycling program and included training and educating of tenants. To further gather necessary information during the pilot, local community-based organizations were recruited to physically canvass multifamily buildings in target areas. In July 2007, the multifamily residential recycling program transitioned from a pilot program servicing 70,000 units to a permanent citywide program serving approximately 427,000 households. On February 17, 2011, then Assemblymember Bob Blumenfield introduced AB 818, the Renters' Right to Recycle Act. The This bill requires an owner of a multifamily dwelling, defined as a residential facility that consists of 5 or more living units, to arrange for recycling services that are appropriate and available for the multifamily dwelling, consistent with the state or local requirements applicable to the collection, handling, or recycling of solid waste, except as provided. AB 818 provided that it would become operative only if AB 341 of the 2011-12 regular session was not enacted and did not become effective on or before January 1st, 2012. The governor approved AB 818 on September 7th, 2011. On October 5th, 2011, AB 341 was signed by the governor. This bill requires a business defined to include a commercial or public entity that generates more than 4 cubic yards of commercial solid waste per week, or is a multifamily residential dwelling of 5 units or more, to arrange for recycling services by July 2012. By requiring a jurisdiction to implement a commercial solid waste recycling program, this bill imposed a state-mandated local program. The city's multifamily residential recycling program contracts with 3 permitted private haulers to provide services for its implementation citywide. To date, the program services approximately 427,000 units within 18,000 properties with 5 or more living units. Approximately 64% of the city's multifamily dwellings has diverted over 91,000 tons of recyclables from landfills. Additionally, sanitation's curbside recycling program services approximately 177,000 multifamily units of 3 or more living units. In total, sanitation provides recycling services to an estimated 82% of the total multifamily units located within the city. The multifamily program provides weekly recycling services, blue bins for the storage of recyclables, and educational materials for tenants. The program mirrors the existing single-family curbside recycling program in that blue bins are provided for collection and the same recyclable materials are accepted in both programs. In addition, the multifamily program offers a valet service in which the city's contracted waste hauler accesses the property weekly to retrieve the blue bin. After servicing the blue bin, the waste hauler returns the blue bin to their designated recycling areas. A number of multifamily apartment complexes in the city do not participate in the voluntary program, as they prefer to have a contracted private waste hauler service their recycling due to a lack of space for the program blue bins on their property or for the convenience of having one source of service. With the initiation of mandatory commercial and multifamily recycling through AB 341, the city can now require that the city's permitted private haulers report on the properties that are receiving recycling services. Sanitation is developing the Zero Waste LA franchise system for both commercial business and multifamily complexes in the city. Through the request for proposal process, sanitation will bring forward franchise contracts for approval. The program will include, at a minimum, blue bin recycling at all customer sites. At that time, 100% of multifamily complexes will have recycling services.
Mr. Blumenfield?
Okay, great. I appreciate the report. One, obviously I have a strong interest in this as I was the author of the bill to create the recycling, and that, as you mentioned, the portion of it that was the Chesborough bill, it sort of became a self-executing provision where basically the same language was put into the Chesborough bill which covered larger commercial, not just multifamily units. But you characterize it as a mandate for local program. The other aspect of it, or what I thought in some ways the more important, is it's a mandate on the apartments themselves that they have to offer they have to provide recycling if it is offered, if there's a way for sanitation to pick it up. So all apartments are required to do that, and as I understand it, it should. I guess I don't know. I don't understand why we're not at 100%, because, as you mentioned, 82% have city sanitation, and then the rest have access to private haulers. So why are we not at 100% now, given that that is what the state law requires?
There's a number of reasons for that. The main one is that AB 341 does not contain an enforcement mechanism. Right. So it is a state requirement on building owners and property owners to subscribe to recycling services, but there really is no enforcement mechanism at this point. They've started to address that by the legislature this year by passing, I want to say, 1398? Okay, AB 1398, which allows the local enforcement agencies of local agencies to enforce it under certain circumstances. But at this point, the City of Los Angeles does not have a mandatory participation ordinance for its commercial businesses.
Right. The mandate is on the apartment owners to enable recycling.
Right.
Except if they have the...
But we don't have the ability in the city family, we don't have the ability to enforce that at this point. We do not have a mandatory participation ordinance.
But that's where the franchise will come in. But it's still, the other piece is, it's still a much bigger number. When I started this bill, we were at less than 40% for apartment recycling.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, and in some cases even less than that. So it was, it's still a pretty big increase in a short period of time, which is encouraging. And with the franchise possibility, or franchises coming, it looks like we'll get there.
Absolutely.
So that's a good report as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Blumenfield, and for that legislation. Pop quiz here. Who started the Zero to Waste campaign in Los Angeles? Councilmember Greg Smith. We should thank him because he really led the charge, 15 years ago. Mr. Koretz?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Can we do more to outreach to multifamily folks about what goes in which bins? Because I still see a lot of mistakes, certainly even in my own building.
We, as part of the rollout, when we first started rolling it out citywide, we have had an ongoing and intensive education program about what to recycle. One of the advantages of the what we call a valet service is that the waste hauler we contract with to pick up the recyclables can actually look in the bins and provide further education. We certainly can, if there are certain areas that we need to retarget, we certainly can go there. Also, as part of the exclusive franchise system, when that takes place, there will be requirements on the franchise haulers not only to have extensive blue bin system throughout the city, which makes the education much easier if every customer has it, but also they're going to have to provide ongoing education for their customers to meet their diversion targets.
Yeah, I doubt there's a specific part of the city. I think everywhere you look, people screw this up to some degree. I even resort a little bit when I take out my own trash and see things where they don't belong. But I think we could do a lot more education. Are we doing dirty MRFing currently?
No, we are not. It is a source-separated program. So we provide blue bins. It's the same materials in the commercial multifamily program that is in our curbside program, that is in our LAUSD schools. It's all the same source-separated program.
Now, once we start our new program, are we anticipating doing that then?
Are you talking about the Zero Waste franchise
Right,
program?
when we finally get our program rolled out in a few years.
Well, part of the implementation plan that was adopted by council included blue bins at every customer site. So at a minimum, they're going to separate those dry recyclables that we take in our current blue bin or an expanded number of materials. After that, certainly if people come in with innovative ideas for how to manage their residual waste so that it doesn't go to a landfill, that's what we're going to be looking at.
And when we do that, will we look at separating food waste or in some way dealing with the fact that a lot of contamination would take place otherwise?
Absolutely. Part of the direction that the state has taken, and certainly what we've looked at in our pilots, is the fact that organics are the largest fraction of the disposed waste stream right now. If we can find a way to cleanly separate that material from the actual schmutz, the trash that cannot be recycled in any way, that's going to take us a long ways towards our zero waste goal.
Okay, and one sort of side question, just a constituent issue that I'm sure we all get. I know we have a restriction on noise in some ways for 7 a.m. We don't allow contractors and builders to start before 7 a.m., but we know we get a lot of complaints about waste trucks coming a lot earlier. Is there any regulation, anything we can do about that?
Well, right now there's an existing noise ordinance in the city. They're not supposed to be near residential areas before 6 a.m. 6 a.m., of course, is still too early for a lot of people, but that is what the noise ordinance requires. At this point, through our permit system, we can notify a hauler when we get a complaint from a customer, but we certainly will have a lot more control over what they do and where under the franchise system. So if we need particular restrictions in certain areas of the city, we can certainly include that in their franchise contract to make it much nicer for the rest of us.
And obviously, if there's violations at that time, it'll be a lot easier to deal with once we have a franchise system.
Absolutely, because you'll have a single hauler in each franchise area.
And also a lot more clout in terms of making sure they do what they need to do.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you.
Members, any additional questions? Mr. Blumenfield, are you satisfied with the report?
Yes.
Very good. We'll go ahead and receive and file that report. Thank you. Item number 4.
Number 4, Mr. Chair, is also Bureau of Sanitation report relative to the city's recycling diversion rate update.
Now I can thank Greg Smith. My apologies.
Yes.
Wrong. Just so excited to see zero waste progress report.
Well, we're excited that the city continues to make progress. This report, which we're asking the committee to ask for a receive and file in council, is basically a snapshot in time to see where we are on our way to zero waste. We reached out to an enormous group of people. It kind of grew upon itself through the UCLA Extension Program. We had international partners, advisory committees, people talking about how to help the city get to zero waste. And what's comforting is that a lot of the recommendations that the committee came up with, which are contained in the Zero Waste Progress Report, mirror the directions that we want to go. Right now, as of the 2011 numbers, which it actually takes about a year and a half to calculate that, we're at 76.4%. It's because of not only the city programs, which took an enormous amount of material out of our waste stream and recycled it, but through public-private partnerships and, frankly, private businesses recognizing that they could save money on the bottom line by not landfilling all the material that comes out. The city has a number of large businesses, and a few of the folks are actually highlighted in the report, such as our hospital partners like Kaiser Permanente, who actually took our work in characterizing their waste and turned it into a system where they look at every single activity they have in their hospital to see where they can buy less material, waste less, and then throw away as little as possible, with the goal of them reaching zero waste themselves. So the more that we can establish those public-private partnerships and help those and reward them for doing this work, the closer that we're going to be able to get to zero waste. So it's a very exciting thing for us to see that we seem to be tracking the right way. The sanitation certainly has a number of items that we're moving forward at this time that are complementary to this to get us up to that goal, but we definitely have a long ways to go before we get there. So we're going to continue the work that my ex-council member, Councilman Smith, brought forward and actually got the zero waste goal adopted by City Council in 2006, and we're going to continue plowing forward on that until we have no landfills that are used by the City of Los Angeles.
Members? Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One that I often ask in one form or another. If we keep items out of our landfill, send them to a foreign country, and they get disassembled and parts of them wind up in the landfill there, does that count as diversion? Do we currently count that as diversion? Do we track it? Do we know what's going on?
I would say that not well enough is the answer to that. We do have contractors that take the material that we collect, and we do know where the material goes, but frankly, not what happens to 100% of it. What we really have lost here in this region, and I've lived here all my life, is the manufacturing base to take those materials and make them into new products. And that's something that we have to have a larger discussion about to make sure that when we do divert more material through some of these programs like the exclusive franchise, that we're going to be reusing and remanufacturing them here. So that's going to be one of our goals in what we look at for the future.
That's obviously a way not only to create local jobs, but to really track that we're making the improvements that we're trying to make. But I always thought if we had some ability to use all the paper we recycle and have some sort of a plant locally, it seems like a much more positive step environmentally than shipping it all to China to have something done with it and then shipping it back in a final form.
We absolutely agree. In fact, later on, you're going to be probably discussing the solid waste IRP process. There's an EIR that is out right now, a program EIR, and part of that is talking about facilities, but it's just facilities to manage the material. Then the next step is the remanufacturing, and that actually could bring a lot of commerce as well.
Exactly. Thank you.
Mr. Blumenfield?
Yeah, it's along the same lines. It seems like it's always about trying to find the markets for the recycled materials, and how do we, as a city, provide incentives for that. And I've always thought there's part of getting to zero waste is figuring that out, whether that's an old notion, but putting a tipping fee on landfills and then putting that into the subsidy of recycled products or something like that, doing something creative to make that process happen faster. And I know that's probably not what's really addressed in the progress report, because you're talking about how we're doing in terms of getting the mechanisms to get to zero waste. But I don't know if there's anything you think the city should be doing on the other end of it, which is creating the markets. Because if the market was there, all this other stuff would fall into place almost automatically.
Well, I think that one of the positive things I've seen is more interest in environmental purchasing. We do have an EPP ordinance on the books here in the city, and we have to look more closely at wherever we can. We have, of course, have a purchasing process, but wherever we can, looking at local sourcing and trying to drive that. The city has an enormous amount of purchasing power, and I think that's one way that we could stimulate that locally. We've certainly, through our own programs, we have provided incentives to recycle material, like construction and demolition projects now have to go to a recycling facility that the city certifies. So we do have ways of getting at that, but it certainly takes a lot of effort to bring them in. There's a number of programs like the Recycle Market Development Zone, which we administer on behalf of the city, which has low-interest loans for those that want to expand or start a recycling-based operation. Perhaps putting more emphasis on those types of programs would help us.
And then the other aspect is on the front end, on the sort of producer responsibility end, and trying to somehow incentivize the folks who are creating the packaging to have packaging that more easily breaks down and that's easier to recycle or less packaging and all the rest. But
or not having the packaging at all. If you look at the single-use bag ban that the city just adopted and which is going to start in January for the large stores, it's not getting used, it's not getting littered, and it's not getting thrown away. So you've taken the management of that material completely out of the system, which saves money.
Very good. So to end, what is our diversion rate, and how close are we to getting to 0%?
Well, 76.4% is what the analysis showed for the current time. How far we need to go, there's still a little over 3 million tons of material from the City of Los Angeles as a whole that goes into landfills right now. So we have to reduce that, and I'm using big numbers. We need to reduce that by at least half to reach our goal of 90% diversion. And obviously, to reach 100%, all 3 million tons need to find another home.
And the state mandate is 70%?
State mandate is 50% on jurisdictions. The 75% is a goal, and it's a statewide goal. It's not a mandate on jurisdictions right now.
Very good. And this is very helpful. I think it's a nice sort of roadmap as we talk about the solid waste IRP and some of the principles that we need to get to the 0%. So thank you very much for your work. And go Bruins.
Thank you.
Isn't that right, Bob?
I'm a Bruin
Isn't
and
that
a
right,
Trojan.
Paul? Go
Yeah.
Bruins, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to say yes. You're a Bruin. Okay, item number 5.
Certainly. Item number 5. Actually, Mr. Chair, you'd like to receive and file number 4?
Yes, we'll receive and file number 4. Now we're on to item number 5.
Okay. Also, a Bureau of Sanitation report relative to authority to submit a brownfield grant application to U.S. EPA for community area-wide assessment in the city.
Very good. If you would present on that and also help the committee understand how the funds will be used to support the city's brownfields program in the event that we get the award.
Sure. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nuna Terzibashian. I work for Bureau of Sanitation, Recycling Division, Brownfields Program. So we're here to request your authorization for us to apply for 2 grants, EPA grants. One would be $400,000 area-wide assessment grant that we will use for brownfield sites to conduct phase 1 or phase 2 environmental assessment throughout the city. So there is no limitation as far which district we can use this money. As long as they're qualified and eligible sites, we can conduct assessments using this fund, if we get the funds, of course. And the second grant is cleanup grant we'll be using for La Crête Center. It's a clean tech campus at our district. So we'll be using, if we get the money, of course, we'll use this fund to clean up the park section of the campus.
How much is that grant potential?
That's $200,000.
$200,000.
Yes.
The first one's $400,000?
First is
And so you mentioned that it could be used citywide. What
Yes.
kind of criteria would you use if we were lucky enough to be awarded?
Right.
What is the criteria that you
Right.
would use
Well,
to select the site?
There's different criteria here, very hard to generalize it, but basically the site owner, the property owner, cannot be responsible for contamination. Let's say if it's a big oil company, we can't use this money to assess their site or provide assessment. So that's the main criteria that goes for every site. But again, there are small nuances, it goes by on an individual basis. What happens, we propose a site and then EPA approves it. Each site is individual.
Right. State EPA or federal?
It's federal.
Federal, that's right.
It's
It's a federal
EPA.
grant.
Actually, I'd like to add that currently Brownfields program has an assessment, area-wide assessment. So we have money already to conduct this work in District 7, 6, and 15. So if there are any needs, you're welcome to let us know.
And you mentioned property owners, they can't be the responsible entity that's contaminated the site. Can the city be one of the property owners? Let's say we
Yes.
buy a site.
Yes,
Let's say it's Taylor Yard, for
That's
example.
ideal project when we helped,
I see where this is
a
going,
lot in
Commissioner.
the past to similar projects, when cities acquiring a site and we're using this as a negotiation tool almost, like leveraging the price of the property. So, yes, we could.
So the city could use the monies.
Yes.
Is the monies, can they be used for purchasing property?
No,
Or- No,
only
it's only for
environmental.
remediation.
Right.
Okay.
Assessment or remediation.
Assessment or remediation. Very good. Members, any questions? Shall we give the department the authority to apply for these grants that would total $600,000?
Yes.
Very good. In that case, that shall be the order, Mr. Prieto. Approve the Bureau of Sanitation's request for authority to submit a brownfield grant application to the United States Environmental Protection Authority for community area-wide assessment and cleanup funds, and if awarded funding, to report back to seek authorization to this committee.
Report back?
Report back if you get it. Sure. Well, I want to figure out how to spend it. I want to help. Very good.
We love helping spending.
Right? That's why we were elected. Very good. There's no public comment cards?
No, sir.
Very good. That concludes this meeting.